So the next stage is to do a bit more shaping with the shadow colour. It's cobalt blue and rose madder again, and I'm using the detailer brush, and remembering that the light's coming from the left, we'll put some shadow into the dome. And then with a damp, clean brush, just soften that in to give us that rounded effect. A bit of shadow underneath the dome now, to emphasise the fact that it's protruding. And then I'm going to swap to the detailer brush. This is a number 2, a really fine brush. I'm going to make the raw sienna and burnt sienna mix a little redder by adding some more burnt sienna, and then add a few little details to suggest the bricks in the wall. And this gives me an opportunity to emphasise that sort of rounded, cylindrical effect. Not too many. I don't want to find that I've got carried away and virtually painted every brick in the wall. It's a suggestion that is always more effective than over-detailing. I'm going to add a little touch of the purple shadow colour to that. That creates more of a grey, something a little bit stronger. And we'll put a few more in with that slightly stronger mixture, particularly on the shadow side where they show up more. And it's just a case of enough detail to make it look convincing without overdoing it. And as I say, it does emphasise the roundedness of the building. Now straight away, while I've got the detailer brush in my hand, I've got some more of that rich dark brown mixture. And we'll start putting a bit of detail into the windows. I'm going to paint some little rectangles to give the impression of the dark behind the panes of glass. And hopefully the white paper that's left behind will look like the window frame. You need to have a brush with a really fine point for this, so you can be accurate. If you smudge at all, that's your white window frame gone. And notice there's a very slight rounded effect to the tops of these window panes to keep us reminded that this building is rounded. And then swapping back to the large detailer, there's quite a strong dark shadow underneath this little walkway. Quite important details these to get accurate. I'm cleaning the brush and then taking a bit of shadow colour to bring that lower down onto the brickwork. Let's put a touch more dark into there. It's that contrast of light against dark that gives us the feeling of bright light in the picture. Okay, so we need to leave that stage to dry. So we'll look now at putting some fine detail onto the sails. And now I have a closer look at them. I've not been as accurate as I perhaps should have been with the masking fluid. This is often the case because it's quite difficult to see exactly where you're going to put it. But it's not a problem because you can always go in with a detailer brush and a bit of opaque white to sharpen them up and put a bit more detail back in. I usually find it's a good idea to keep opaque white away from my palette because it's difficult to get rid of it and it can make all subsequent washes a bit chalky. So I just squeeze a bit onto the edge of the drawing board, dampen the brush. It's important not to dilute the opaque white too much or it's no longer opaque, but you have to put a touch of water with it or it's not workable. So now I can just go back in and sharpen up a bit of detail. This is a lot better than doing the wholesale in opaque white. And that's where the masking fluid came in. It's given us a really good start. For instance, down this edge where I've missed it, if I'm careful enough and get a really fine line, I can just put that in with the opaque white. And it's a fine balance of getting just enough water with the white to make it workable, but not so much that it becomes virtually transparent. A little bit into this area here. Probably emphasise that little sphere on top of the mill. And that edge there, the edge facing the light. And then while I've got this white on the brush, we'll look at this little rail lower down. Taking that right across. And then putting the uprights in. You need to work quite rapidly because opaque white dries very quickly. And then just putting a cross piece in down there. And then finally there's some little struts that support that platform. And that's that stage completed. So now I'm going to continue to work on the sails with the detailer brush and that mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And it's really a case of putting a little bit of shadow in to help define the structure. Worth taking the time to get these little details correct, and you find the sail looks far more three-dimensional than when it was just white against blue. A little touch under that edge as well. Same effect at this side, bearing in mind the light's coming from the left and above, so that tells you whereabouts roughly to place these little indications of shadow. Just continue working with this really fine point of the brush. This little detailer brush gives me plenty of control, so long as the point is fine enough. Touch more detail into this area. Some little struts and supports to this structure. You could go on forever with the detail, but you do need to keep asking yourself when you've done enough detail, because some simplification is quite important. Still with this brown mixture, this ultramarine blue and burnt sienna on the brush, we'll make this little sphere look three-dimensional by giving it a shadow side, and with a clean brush just softening that in. And there's a couple of little windows here. And down here, and while I've got this colour, I ought to put these in so that they're ready for when I paint the walls of these buildings in the next stage. Just one other thing, with some more shadow colour, this is cobalt blue and rose madder, we'll try and make this little door here look as though it's recessed. And it's the same with this window here, just a bit of shadow over the top of it and down the left hand side, just to sort of recess that. Okay, so we need to let that stage dry.